Hi everyone, Ashton here, and welcome back to Precision Horology. Today we're going to be looking at a Heuer dash-mounted 12-hour timer. Now this clock is basically a stopwatch that sits on the dash of a vehicle. It's paired in conjunction with an 8-day Heuer master time clock. Now for a brief history of these dash-mounted timers and the 8-day clock, you can see a previous video of mine which discusses this clock in more detail. This timer displays the elapsed minutes and seconds via the hands on the dial, and the elapsed hours are displayed in the aperture at 6 o'clock. We can see that we have an inner rotating bezel that is turned like so. We have our start, stop, and reset pushers as well. Our start, stop pusher is located at 12 o'clock, and our reset pusher is located at 1 o'clock. Our start-stop pusher also acts as our winding crown to give power to the train. Now remember, this is a stopwatch, not a clock, so it only runs when the watch is engaged. It doesn't display regular time, it displays elapsed time. Regular time is displayed on the 8-day clock. Once we've opened the case back of the clock, we can remove the 2 case screws that are securely holding the movement inside the case. This will loosen the movement so that it can be dropped out of the case, and we can then remove the dial and hands so that we can begin dismantling and seeing exactly what needs to happen during the service process of the clock. With the movement successfully removed from the case, we mount it in a movement holder and remove the hands. This gives us access to remove the 2 screws that are holding the dial in place. With our dial removed, we can see a numbered disc. This disc looks very similar to a traditional date display disc, but in this case, the numbers on the disc display our elapsed hours from our timer. With our elapsed hour counter disc removed, we can see the gearing and mechanism underneath that helps to work the system. Here we can see we have a jumper which acts against the teeth of this star wheel to indicate the correct number on the disc. The disc is then screwed to this star wheel to keep it in place. This wheel is driven by another wheel which it receives its impulse from. Now that we've examined our mechanism and checked the functions, we can start to remove the dial side of the watch. We remove the screws and the wheels as we go. We check each component to make sure that there is no damage and put aside any components that may need to be addressed. We can now get to work removing the remaining screws and levers that are left on this section of the movement. We again check each component as we go for any wear or issues that may need to be addressed. When dealing with delicate small components such as screws, we be careful so as not to damage these screws or perhaps lose them. With the very top plate of the mechanism removed, we reveal more screws and more wheels that need to be removed underneath. Another layer, as it were, has been revealed. We remove these screws and components and again check them for wear. With another layer of the movement removed, we can see the balance stop spring in action. When the timer is started, the spring will be away from the body of the balance. When the timer is stopped, the spring will be against the body of the balance. This is all achieved via the column wheel here, which controls the function. The column wheel is made in 2 sections. We have the teeth at the bottom that act against the spring, so the column wheel can be moved around and started and stopped. Then we have the upper portion, or the columns. These act as a blocking mechanism of sorts, so that the watch can't be reset when it shouldn't be. It's at this point that we can remove the wheel that our seconds hand sits on in the movement. This isn't really a traditional wheel that our seconds hand would sit on. It's more of a cannon pinion, and we can remove the friction fit pinion with our levers. We can see that we have a heart cam attached to the bottom so that the seconds hand can be reset. We remove it finally with our tweezers to take it from the movement. We can then remove our remaining chronograph driving wheel. Again, we use the levers for this purpose. At this point, we can flip the movement over to the movement side of the watch so that we can let the power out of the mainspring. This makes sure that it's safe to be able to dismantle the movement. We can also remove our winding stem from the watch, as it's a step we'll need to take anyway, so we might as well do it now. We screw the setting lever back in once it's unscrewed. We can see here that we have a spring that's attached to our crown wheel. Now there's a small fracture in this spring, and as we can see, once we pull it apart, it will actually snap. So this is a spring that we're going to need to source, but I don't like our chances. So most likely, we're going to have to fashion a spring out of something we can find, which is the correct profile and dimensions. With the power from the mainspring successfully removed from the movement, and our ratchet wheel and crown assembly removed from the movement, we can get to work on removing our balance bridge. Our balance bridge in this situation is held in with 2 screws that need to be removed before our balance will be free to drop out of the movement. We need to be abundantly cautious when dealing with delicate components such as the balance with its fragile pivots and delicate balance spring, which can easily become deformed. We keep the balance to the side in a safe place while we dismantle the rest of the movement. Next, we can take a cursory glance at our escapement. We can check the freedom of our pallet fork, the end shake and the side shake. If we look at the wheel train bridge, we can see that we don't have jewels in this movement. We have brass bushings, or really, they're just holes that are drilled in the plate that the wheels bear into. We do have some bushings, like in the situation of this pallet cock here, and in fact we have a very worn bushing which is going to need replacing. With the train wheel bridge removed, we can see the barrel and wheels of the watch. We slowly remove the wheels and inspect each component as we go. We're looking for any undue wear on the wheels that needs to be addressed. Usually, wear would be on the pivots. The pivots become scored and marked. It's difficult, however, to see any kind of damage when there's old gummed up lubrication on the wheels. So we really need to perform an initial cleaning on these train wheels and then check the pivots under heavy magnification, such as a 20 times eye loop or perhaps a 20 or even 40 times magnification on a microscope. It's very important that we address any wear on train wheels, as this will rob the movement of needed amplitude. We can then make our initial assessment of the bushings or bearings in the plate which our pivots go into. If there's any wear that needs to be addressed, we can look at it at this point and fix the issue. We then remove our winding pinion from the watch and inspect it for wear. It's different to a traditional winding pinion as it doesn't engage with a sliding pinion, as the time on this clock never needs to be set, as it's a timer. We can now remove the mainspring from the barrel. When removing the mainspring from the barrel, we need to take great care so as not to distort or damage the mainspring in any way. We also don't want the mainspring to fly out in an uncontrolled manner, as that could harm us or people around us. We slowly remove the mainspring so that if we do have to use it again, it is still possible, because sometimes replacements aren't available. We remove the hooking end, we put it on the bench and check for flatness. So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll go through the repair and assembly process of the clock movement. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to subscribe to be notified about the next video. Feel free to leave a comment and share with your friends. Thanks again, and see you next time.